This is going to be an informal meeting and presentation. I want to thank you all for taking some time just to listen to a journey that I went on. And so I will be back in about 2 minutes. So grab your water, want to stay healthy and hydrated, and we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Thanks. All right. So I definitely want to be able to maximize the time. So we might have the opportunity to have some conversation and talk about some of the things that were shared at the end of this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So Jumbo, once again, my name is Dion Jordan. I use he, him, his. I am the current director of the Office of Equity and Multicultural Services for ODHS and also the proud sponsor of Best ERG. And so I first want to once again thank you, taking time out of your schedule. I know you saw an email or something was forwarded, read a title, and probably just got curious about what this was all about. And so I do want to give a few disclaimers out there before we get started so we can maximize our time together. So one is what's really important I want you all to know is I am not about to offer a history lesson by any means. But we will definitely be talking about history, right? And when talking about history, it might hit people differently, right? We have a complicated and sometimes ugly past. And so I don't think avoiding those conversations is helpful, but to learn from those conversations and learn from what happened is super helpful. So, what I'll be sharing with you today is my personal journey to connect to my roots, to learn the systems of oppression in order that we might have the opportunity to dismantle them. And also, along the way, something happened that I didn't expect, but I was so grateful for. Healing took place. And so, I'm hoping in my sharing that we can learn some new tactics, right? Learn some new ways of dismantling these systems of oppression that touch so many folks, so many marginalized, protected class, so many people, and make ODHS truly an agency that can live up to its equity North Star. And so one of the things that I had realized that I didn't really articulate well to myself is when you're doing equity work, when you're doing anti-racism work, right? When you're doing work for social justice and create that sense of belonging, it's hard work. I think we all can agree. It's even harder when you're part of a protected class or marginalized community. And the reason being is you can't just turn it off at 5 o'clock. You just can't walk away, right? You realize that it's your life. I will be Black everywhere I go, every day of my life, kind of moving forward. And I didn't realize personally the toll that was taken on me. But I realized slowly but surely my thinking started getting a little jaded. My patience started getting a little shorter. And even my health started taking a little bit of a hit. And so this journey here wasn't only something that remotivated me, but it also helped me to heal in a lot of different ways. So I'm hoping that what I share might trigger some new thoughts, might trigger some new ideas on how we could work together in dismantling these systems of oppression, and also that folks that might be looking for a way to heal from life's isms, right? That you might find that along the way as well. And so with that, we will go ahead and we will get started. Oh, one other thing. My ask is utilizing the chat. The chat will be available throughout this presentation. I ask that you use the chats for, educational reasons, right? If there's something that comes up that speaks to you, please, right, put it in the chat, right? If there's something insight that you just might want to share, please put it in the chat. Only thing I ask that we don't do is just kind of go back in conversation in the chat, right? Because sometimes that could be distracting for those who might be listening. Okay, with that being said, and with no special form or fashion, um, let's move forward. All right. I've broken this into different sections. The first section is what I like to call the awakening section. Um, the definition is there, but let me start with a popular story that's been told in many different ways. So there was a teacher and a student that was sitting on the side of a mountain watching a noble, brave man rescue others from drowning in this river, right? So he's going back into the water, he's grabbing people, he's pulling them out, he's going back in, sometimes grabbing two people, pulling them back out, risking his own life, risking his own health, trying to save these people from drowning. But there were just so many, but he just was committed not to stop. The student looked at the teacher sitting on the side of the mountain and asked the teacher, "Wow, isn't that a brave man?" And the teacher said, "Maybe, but wouldn't it be better if he went upstream to find who's pushing them in the river?" The reason why I bring this up is I think we're spending a lot of time at ODHS trying to save people from drowning in the river. We do a lot of things. We cannot educate enough people. We can't train enough people. We can't try to change enough minds to really make lasting change. What I would suggest is we need to learn how to go upriver, right? And find out who or what are pushing people in here in the first place. Because if we could dismantle what that is, then we will have less people drowning. And then those who are doing the work, right, committed to the work, won't always have to wear themselves out. They don't always have to put their health at risk and their well-being at risk trying to, get people out of the river. We're going to go upstream. This presentation is a look at what's upstream that's pushing people in the river. It's also a challenge for us to relook at how we're doing things because when we know better, we can do better. And I learned a lot on this journey. So, this is how it all started. About 8 months ago, there was a retreat leadership. So, it was our director, Farrah Boers, our deputy director, Liesel, and the directors of the programs. Every now and then I try to call them all together so we can have some brave conversation. And when I speak about brave conversation, let's talk about the things that we normally don't talk about that we need to talk about. Let's have some difficult conversations. So usually we have this at somebody's house, right? Because when you have brave conversations, sometimes it's nice to have a good setting. We've had it at Farrah Boers' house. This particular time, we had it at Liesel's house. And when I walked in the door and saw Liesel, she handed me a book. She said, she was out someplace, thought of me, and bought me a book. Little did I know how much the book would change me. The book is titled Stamped from the Beginning. This book is currently, it's on Netflix right now. It's actually a documentary on Netflix. The documentary doesn't even do it justice compared to the book itself. This book is a graphic history of racist ideas in America. Like, and even before it showed up in America, right? How it was formed from the very beginning. And one of the things that really stood out in this book for me, right, and such a important point for us to learn. Sometimes when we think of racism, when we think of sexism, transphobia, ableism, any of the isms, we think, you know what, those are just, just ignorant people that, that are thinking like that. No, 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 no. They're highly intelligent. This system was created by highly intelligent people. We're talking about philosophers, teachers, politicians, right? Scientists. They all came up with this system that we're trying to dismantle. And if we continue to look at it as, you know what, people who think like that are just ignorant, then we're always going to be behind. We're always going to be losing in this battle. And we have to understand that this was very strategically put together. It wasn't by accident that these systems are put together. It's almost as if you were walking on the beach and you saw a pocket watch, right? Old school. You saw a pocket watch. If you were to open up that pocket watch and look on the inside and you saw all the springs and all the pieces that are put together in a pocket watch, you knew by looking at it that, you know what, this was put together. This didn't just come together. This was put together. That's the same thing with these systems of oppression that we speak of, that it was put together by highly intelligent people. This book here really breaks it down. It really does an awesome job at looking at what it would take, right, to go upstream and dismantle some of these systems of oppression that are currently, in place. Certain themes that you find in this book is there's always going to be resistance at every turn, at every age, from 1900s, 1800s, you could go on 1960. At every stage of progress, there's always going to be a group where the system is going to work for itself and bring resistance. But one thing that also shines through is persistence beats resistance, right? That we just have to continue on and continue on because we just know there's always going to be something that comes up. And last but not least, it's a misprint here. The book leaves clues, not glues. This book leaves a lot of clues around what we could do to really bring the equality, bring the equity, and the justice for all that we often speak of. So this was one. So when Liesl gave me the book, I couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover. And when I was all done, that's when I had made up my mind. You know what? I'm going to study the system. I'm going to go back as far as I can and learn as much as I can about the systems of oppression that are in place in government, in educational systems, in the DOJ that just exist so that we might have a better tactic right here in our agency in dismantling them. And this book kicked it off. So from this book, I ended up reading another book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. This, too, is another great book. Great read, especially with the anti-racism work that we're doing. And so before I get into the trips that I made and what was learned, let me share just some highlights from both of these books that I think can help us rethink how we're doing this work. So one of the things that came to mind was really identifying racism comes from racist policies, practice, and ideas. And it's important to know that anybody could carry these things. This is how it shows up, right? It shows up in our policies, it shows up in our practices, and it shows up in our ideas. There are some folks that will say, Black people can't be racist. Well, guess what? Black people can have racist ideas, they can follow racist policies, and they can do racist practice against other people of color, right? So, in one sense, yeah, I understand what they're saying because where the power is tied, but anybody and everybody can fall in this category because anybody can have these ideas. Anybody can do these things, right? And anybody can follow these policies. So that's one piece to really try to unpack. But if we wanted to go a little bit deeper, what the book really shares out is how racism is not so much a social construct as it is about power. Racism was just the face of it. But at the end of the day, it's about power. So think about that with all the isms. It's about who has the power, who has control, right? Because those who have the power want to keep the power. And racism just happened to be a great tool to separate those who should have the power from those who shouldn't. And so we need to look at the work that we do, not as if it's all about race, right? Because it's never been all about race. Intersectionality is so important, but understand that behind all this, it's a power problem. It's a power struggle and it's a power issue around keeping power. That might cause a different conversation, right, on how we look at things. Even when we look within our agencies, even when we look within our systems, who's controlling the power and why? Is it to keep the power or is it to make a difference, right, in the lives of Oregonians and those that we serve? Okay, something else that came up that was great. The original problem of racism has not been solved by persuasion. Such an important point. That goes back to what I was saying earlier around jumping in the river and trying to save everybody. It's not that's not the most effective way. Make no mistake about it. We still need to educate folks. Yes. We still need to train folks. Yes, we got to do all those things. But that at the end doesn't always bring the change that we need. Knowledge is only power if knowledge is put to the struggle for power, right? Changing minds is not a movement. Critiquing racism, saying how it's wrong, that's not activism. Changing minds is not activism. Activism produces power and policy change, not mental change. So if a person has no record of a power or policy change, then the person is not really an activist, so to speak. So what we want to do is, yes, we still need to train folks. We still need to educate folks. We still need to invest in our people, no doubt about it. But if we're not changing systems, if we're not changing policy, then all we're doing is keep jumping in the river, right? Trying to save folks, and trying to help folks to become, anti-racist, more equitable, help them find that sense of belonging, and not realizing the system above, the policies above, the things above are what's pushing people into the water. Okay, another thought. A racist policy. So when we talk about policy, what are we talking about, right? Some people might think about a piece of paper. It's much more than that. It's any measure that produces or sustains inequities between groups. So an anti-racist policy is any measure or procedure that sustains racial inequity between any type of racial groups, right? Or any groups in general. It doesn't even have to be racial. It's just this book happens to lead with race. So we're talking about written and unwritten laws. We're talking about procedures. We're talking about processes. We're talking about regulations. We're talking about guidelines. Anything that governs people is a policy. Those are the places we really need to focus. Because when we focus on those things, now that has a better chance of changing the behavior of people than us trying to persuade people, right? When a law comes out and says that you can't do something, there's a little more accountability behind that than when a person says you shouldn't do that. So going upstream means looking at these policies, right? And how can we best make the greatest impact? So these are just some of the reflections that I got from these two books, right? But let me tell you what I try to do as a personal practice. You can't believe everything you read. Not anymore. Well, actually, probably never. When I think about some of those history books I read, but you can't believe everything that you read. So what I try to do is I try to read it in a book. I try to find it in a documentary someplace, right, where I might be able to hear the voices. I try to look for it in museums. Where else? If I could find it, or in folks who lived it. If I could, find it in 3 or 4 places, then I know, okay, this must be true, right? There's some documentation, there's some proof that this happened. I read these books. It resonated with me, right? It resonated from a point like, ooh, might want to look at this work a little bit different moving forward. But now I need to make sure what I'm reading was true. Does this line up? Because if I go back in time and I look at the champions of past, whether it's the civil rights movement, if I go back further than that around Reconstruction, if I go all the way back, what did they do? What did they do that brought progress? right? That's what I want to find. That was my journey. Let me go back, not just find out exactly what the system is and how to dismantle it, but let me go find the champions who did it and learn what did they do that we might have the opportunity to bring that to ODHS, right? And use some of those practices. Okay, so with this new knowledge, it was time to board a plane. Off I go. My first stop was Washington, D.C. and South Carolina. Okay. So in Washington, D.C., I was going to go to the African American Museum that was down there. I have a friend who works for the Pentagon. And so they said they could get me into the White House because I was really interested in seeing some things and talking to some people that were in the confines. So I ended up going to the White House. And then, I'm that guy. I had to swing by and have a conversation with Dr. Martin Luther King. So from there, I flew out to South Carolina, the Deep South, right? One of the places where the first slave ship showed up, so that I might have a chance to talk to the locals, talk about a little bit about the impact. And there was something special at that museum that I really needed to investigate and I wanted to share out with you all. So this was the first stop. So on the plane, I went. Here we go. So this is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I don't know if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've had a chance to go to the Smithsonian and all the different museums that are out there. This particular one will literally take you about 2 days to go through this entire museum. It is huge. It is like, 5 or 6 different floors. It's so huge. If I had to show you a picture of it, this is it. Now, also, let me put a quick commercial in here. All these pictures were off my camera. Well, I should say 85% of these pictures were off my camera. So anybody want a good camera, get the Pixel. Let me tell you, the Pixel is like wonderful. So anyways, this is the museum. It was built and designed as a slave ship, as you can see. When you go into the museum, I mentioned that there's different floors. From the very bottom floor is like going to the bottom of the slave ship, right? But each floor you go is like a different generation, a different time. So you might go from slavery, then you might go to Reconstruction, then on the next floor, all the way up to Obama being president, all the way up to today. So it's interesting when you go up this museum how you see progress and what took place. And so this was my mission, right? Let me go through here and learn. Let me see as much that I could figure out about the system and how to dismantle it. So walking in the door, right? This was the first wall that you see. You see some familiar faces for some, Thurgood Marshall, Arsenio Hall, Emmett Tills, a lot of stories, right? A lot of history that you have a chance to kind of see in an order that you could really see progress, right? And that was important to me because I needed to know that we were making progress. I needed to know that we're not treading water someplace or this is as good as it gets. And so when you first walk in the door, that's where you go. And so although there's different ways that people could, go through this museum, I decided to go from the bottom to the top. And so starting at the bottom, this is where we were, right? There's a lot of histories that's being shared. This one happens to show real shackles, right, of what was worn and how small the auction blocks were that the slaves were, on when they came to America and where they were standing. But this is what is ironic, and this is the shift in thinking, is the more that I learned, the more that I read, at the museum and the more that I read in the books, I realized these shackles and this auction block, these weren't really the things that held us down the most, right? Um, it were these things, pen and paper, policy. It's what was written, right, that keeps things in place. My father used to say it like this: if it's not written, it's not real. Right? And so there were some things that were written down that tied these oppressions into place. And it was such an oxymoron because there was also such liberty in some of the documents that were written. So when you read it, everything from the Declaration of Independence all the way to the addresses to Virginia, you'll read things around freedom and equality. and you keep reading, you read around how, the slave should be always obeying their master, right? At the same time, in the same type of articles. Jefferson wrote justification for both American independence and racial inequality. It's the glasses, and these are actually his glasses, right? That he actually wore. That's inside the museum. The compass, the pen, all those things were the utensils that he used. Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, right? We all know this. This is true. And yet enslaved more than 600 people over the course of his life. That's the paradox, the oxymoron, whatever you want to call it, of America. We say one thing, but at the same time, we're kind of living something a little bit different. Once again, he wrote, right? All men are created equal, and yet enslaved more than 600 people over his lifetime. Although he made some great legislative attempts, make no mistake about it, he did some wonderful things to help, right, the movement around anti-slavery. And at the same time, in some of his speeches and some of the things that he shared, was that he suspected Black people to be inferior to white people. He actually said this in his notes to the state of Virginia, right? And so this is what's challenging. Even when I bring it to ODHS, we talk about rise, right? We talk about equity, right? And we've gotten to the point where we're really good at knowing, hey, we got to bring this up in the meeting, we got to bring this up in the conversation, but it doesn't always mean that's what's showing up and that's what we're practicing. It didn't way back when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and it doesn't really happen today. So the question is, how can we make that shift? And one of the tools, one of the things that they realized would change courses is changing policies, right? Write it down. That's one thing I've learned. We have got to change these things because in time, what's written ends up being real, and what's spoken sometimes fades away. Let me move on. The Declaration of Independence. What does it say? All men are created equal. It says with certain unalienable rights, right? We know that. But did you also know it says whenever any form of government, that's us, becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. That's wonderful. And that's also in Independence, but we don't always, that's not something that we always highlight when we read the Independence. But it's our duty, right? It's our duty to bring that equality. It's our duty to bring that equity, and it's our duty to bring that justice. And so I was definitely excited about that piece. Okay. Well, I also want to share that, so you go through just a lot of reading, right? A lot of information. But once again, it wasn't all bad. Like this wasn't, it was deep, right? I felt it a little bit, but I knew what to expect. So I was able to kind of go through these different floors. Eventually, I made my way up, right? Got a little more into the movies, to the arts, the entertainment, to the different contributions around science, the different contribution around the arts, all these different contributions that African Americans have brought. So it definitely has a balance within this museum. But it was helpful to see, right, the progress that was taking place and the contributions that were taking place. So after 2 days, I finished the museum. Okay, and now having got what I needed there, I was off to the White House. So I called my friend. I said, "Oh, can we still get to the White House?" They said, "Yep, let's go." So here we go, off to the White House. Not impressed. Let me say that. Not impressed. Was not impressed with the White House. Let me tell you about the White House, right? So this was my goal. I wanted to go inside and I wanted to find somebody who worked in there that wasn't politician, just, a worker in the White House to have some real conversation, right? That I might have the conversation to really kind of understand some history and some stories that you're not going to hear, other places. So what happens is you see some people outside the White House, they have two tours. They got one tour for the public, right? For normal people to come take a look. You only go to the bottom floor. You only go to the areas that they want you to see, right? Certain rooms where certain pictures were taken or certain documents were signed. But it's not till you go on these other floors where you see the living areas, right, where the real stuff was taking place. The only place I could take pictures was on the bottom floor, right? That's the only place I could take pictures. But I did have a chance to have some conversations and learn some things. I don't know if anybody knows how the White House, originally had got its name. There's a lot of information out there, but how the White House got its name was actually by President Theodore Roosevelt, because he invited Booker T. Washington, right, educated black man, very important person during the time, to the White House, and Southerners were in uproar. They were so upset for the first time, right, that a black body came into and was an invited guest at the White House, sat at the president's dinner table, talked to his wife, talked to his child, and those in the South, they just lost their mind. So much so that they were thinking about, Roosevelt shouldn't be our president. Surprisingly, 2 days later, they changed the name because it wasn't called the White House before. Following that, he renamed it to the White House, right? So it's interesting how even the concept and the thoughts and the ideas that people had when we talk about anti-blackness took place, and how important it is sometimes for some of our forefathers to kind of have the idea that they're really kind of straddling two fences. On one side, yeah, I know this is wrong. And on the other side, ooh, but I'm really kind of benefiting from this. And I got to keep people, right, happy moving forward. It's the same struggle that we have today, right? It's the same struggle with all of these isms. And on one side, we know it's wrong. On the other side, ooh, are we willing to give up power? Are we willing to give something up so that all can have the equality that we talk about? So I say all that to say there wasn't a whole lot to see inside the White House, but for me, I did want to see her. So, I did take that picture. And of course, I did want to see him. So I took that picture. And these were the only two pictures of people of color in the entire White House. So, yeah, it was what it was. I was hoping to see, just other types of representations from any other protected classes. Didn't see a whole lot that was in there, but it was interesting talking to the people that I did talk to. Once again, I couldn't do any video, and some of the information I'm not allowed to put on here. I was sworn to secrecy, but either way, it was an interesting experience walking through and talking to folks. Leaving the White House, I told you that now I need to go talk to Dr. King. So that's where I went, right? Time to reflect, time to think about, ooh, what did I learn at the museum? What did I learn at the White House? How does this align with what I read in the books? Because remember, I'm on a mission here. I'm trying to find what works, what doesn't work. What are we doing wrong, right? And what can we do better, and what can we do right? And so after sitting out there with Dr. King, having some good conversation, there were some things that I learned, that I jotted down. Whoops, there we go. So the first one was this: there's a role for everybody, right? Especially when it came to that civil rights movement, everybody had a role to play. I don't care what your protected class, what your background was, what your experience was. Everybody has a role in this work. And we talk about that here at the agency, right? When we talk about embedding equity and bringing a sense of belonging and access for all, everybody has a role. And it's not OMS's work, right? It's not your equity manager's job. It's all of us. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, ooh, right? What's my role? What part can I play? Policy is key. That's what they did. They changed policies, right? There was a time where, and I've used this example before, that people of color couldn't use, a white only drinking fountains or bathrooms. What changed? People's hearts and people's minds to say, "Ooh, let's let them have it." No, you know what changed? The law changed, and when the law changed, in time, people's behaviors changed. Right? And there's always that debate. What do you have to change first, people's minds or change the policy? You only got to change a few minds. Which minds do you need to change? Those who control the policy. right? Because then after a while, the same thing was interracial marriage. Like interracial marriage, no, you don't do it. No, it's nasty, it's wrong, all those things they would say until they changed the law. And when they changed the law, it started happening more. Now today, people for the most part aren't even thinking twice about that. That's why it's so important that we focus on policy, right? And when I say focus on policy, I'm not saying ignore everything else. No, not at all. We still need to train. We still need to educate. Still need to change minds. But if we want lasting, long change, policy is where it's at. The other thing I realized they did well was the media and messaging, right? Think about the visuals of the hoses that were on the people, right? That woke up the minds of people in the north who had no idea what was taking place, right? And so even us in our messaging, in our media, right? Is it in RISE language, right? Are we sharing, information that's transparent that folks in our communities and in our agency have the opportunity to do better? Or are we power hoarding even by the messages and what we share with folks versus what we don't share with folks? The other thing was, the Martins, the Rosas, the Mount, all those folks, they didn't do it by themselves. They engaged community. And that's one thing that I think is a theme coming out. I know our community engagement, one of our community engagement managers, Antonio, when he was to be the only one, right, the only community engagement person with the title that was doing the work, and then slowly but surely people started talking about it more. He used to say all the time his biggest fear was that this was going to be another ODHS flavor of the month, right? That, oh yeah, everybody's talking about community engagement, but nobody's doing it. But here it is 2 years later, right? The community engagement team is growing. Community engagement is growing within programs, right? It's growing within districts because we're realizing that's why we're here, and we can't do the work on the inside without the community on the outside. Civil rights movement, right? They kind of led the way and kind of showed what that looks like. They developed a strategic plan. This wasn't by accident, right? They put a plan together, right? Rosa Parks being on that bus what was a plan. It was, they were fed up and they said, this is how we're going to do this, right? We got to do the same thing. We have got to be strategic in how we're going to reach our equity North Star because the system is not going to let us do it just by ourselves. We need courageous leaders, right? We need leaders who aren't afraid to be courageous, who are not afraid to step away from the crowd, right? And do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And then last but not least, we got to vote, right? We got to get out there. We definitely have to vote. Lessons learned from with Martin Luther King, but don't take my word for it. Take it from those who actually have done it. Yeah. So anyway, that puts me up a little bit. I don't know if it's the music or just the movement. But another theme that you're gonna find out throughout my presentation and throughout my journey is the power of women throughout this entire process. Make no mistake about it. Like I think guys get too much, the fellas get too much of the limelight. But one thing that I learned, and we're gonna see throughout this, it was the women in these other spaces um, that were the true champions in this work. And I think this video by itself even shows that as well. Okay, so it was time to leave Washington and go to South Carolina before heading out to Africa. So in South Carolina, the reason why I chose South Carolina is because of its history and also because of the museum that's there, the International African American Museum. Beautiful museum. It's brand new. But what is different about this museum from the other one is this one sits on the shore of the Atlantic, right where the slave ships came in, right? So you can see that pier right there. On the other side is a beach area where they actually kind of came, where the ships actually came in. And South Carolina being one of the places like Virginia, right, where the first slave showed up, there is still remnants and there's still history that lives within South Carolina and in the South that doesn't really resonate as much in the North, but it's highly felt. And so when you go through the museum, beautiful museum, right? This is, once again, these are actual pictures. And when you walk through, there's a lot of different rooms in here where you can sit down and listen to documentaries, right? And you could hear the stories of those that were there, who lived it, who experienced it, and the stories from all different colors, all different people, right? Really kind of sharing what took place then and how life is even now. So once you have a chance to kind of hear the documentaries and see the stories and see the artifacts, but at the same time, this one isn't as big. But this one did have a library in the back where you could study your roots. And that was huge. And so once again, walking through, trying to learn as much as I could, but I needed to get to the library. And the library is the Center Family of History. This is where you can meet with somebody, and they can help you trace your roots. I wanted to trace my roots to see if my ancestors were freed or if they were slave, right, or enslaved. I wanted to trace my roots, even if I was enslaved, who was the family, right? Are they still around, right? That I might have the opportunity to have conversation. And I really wanted to learn as much as possible. And so sitting down and meeting with a researcher, I've had the opportunity within 3 months, because it takes them about 3 months to do the history, right? To do the check. So I'll have a chance to go back and sit with them and have my own moment to kind of really kind of learn where did I come from? Who really are my people, right? Oh, hold on. Sorry. My father never knew his father. That whole side, I have no idea. I don't know if we were doctors. I don't know if we were kings or queens. I don't know anything. So this was big. This was a process of healing for me. Okay, let me let me move on. So the other piece that really kind of stood out, right, as I was going through this, is how some of the things we talk about today, right, and we think is like new, like we talk about intersectionality, like that's a new term that just came up. Did not, Sojourner Truth talk about intersectionality when she talked about "Ain't I a Woman"? Right? So it's interesting is these aren't new concepts. These aren't new conversations that we're having. We have been in the struggle and these conversations for a long time. If you're not familiar with Sojourner's Truth, Ain't I a Woman, it's time to be. Listen to the intersectionality.
Well, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this they call it? That's it, honey. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negro rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? When that little man in black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me. And now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say.
That spoke for itself. I don't need to say a thing. Kind of following that one. But this is also a theme that you will find throughout, right? Not just the power of the woman, but also the mistreatment of a woman, right? When we as American society learn how to treat the Black woman kindly, all America will be treated kindly. I promise you that. Okay, let's move on. So this is the dock from where they came in, right? So once you go down here, this was it. This is where I stood for a good 15 or 20 minutes, kind of looking out. When I closed my eyes, I could just imagine what the ships look like, the very first slave ships coming in, and the feeling that they might have had while coming. It was tough. I will admit that. So tough and so powerful is this place that they have what they call a quiet room. And a quiet room is the opportunity where you have a chance to come and sit down. It's a private room with nothing but a bench and a Kleenex. And I sat there probably for about 30 minutes because I didn't know whether to be mad and upset about the past or be motivated about the past. Because I think one of the things I shared earlier that was troubling for me was I just felt overwhelmed in this work. Like, we're not going to win. Like, I'm not going to solve racism. I'm not going to solve sexism. I'm not going to solve ableism. I'm not going to stop transphobia. But, it's not going to happen. So why? Why do it? Like, I could be doing something else. I could be working for airlines and travel around the world for free. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many other things. Why still do it? But when I sat there and read the stories of others, this is what I realized, that I just have a leg to run. It's not for me to win the race. It's for me to run my leg of the race, right? It's for all of us. Like, as director here, I need to help build the Equity North Star. I need to help build a path to it. And then guess what? I got to pass that on to somebody else. And I think that's important that we all know that we just got to know what is our leg to run. Because when we look at things and we look at the timeline of things, like this is the legs they've already ran. And it's and a lot of this right here ties into the slavery piece up to Jim Crow. We've only been at this well since, maybe early 2000, a little bit before, maybe after after Jim Crow. I'll give us that much. After Jim Crow. That hasn't been that long ago, though. I mean, it hasn't been that long. And so it's unrealistic for us to have these expectations of the type of change that we think we're going to bring by ourselves. But if we could understand what's our leg to run at our time at ODXS, if we could define that, right, then we'll have the opportunity to do great things. I don't know if we'll ever reach our equity North Star, but I know we can't stop trying, right? I don't know how far we'll go to the path to the equity North Star. Chances are I may not be here when we reach that equity North Star, but that's okay. I just have a race to run. And there's been too many people before us that have really gone through some things for us to stop now, right? That's what I needed at that point in that quiet room at that time. I needed that type of motivation to understand, yeah, Dion, it's not all on you, right? It's not all on your office. It's not even all on everyone who's working for ODHS now. But we have a race to run. We have to define what's our leg. So when we pass the baton off, right, they're in a better running position, closer to the star than what we were. Because those who came before us, they ran a hell of a leg. Let me just say that. They ran their asses off. Excuse my French on that one, right? And I want to be able to, and we should be able to do the same. All right. It's time to leave the Americas. Section 2, being woke. Alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. A lot of people wonder what woke means. Can I tell you where woke really comes from so we don't have to keep telling these lies? The term woke was created by Black people, referring to being alert to systemic racism and racial injustices. The first documented use of this phrase, stay woke, happened in the 1930s. Not 2021, not 1930, when Leadbelly, who was an artist, ended his song by advising Blacks traveling through Alabama, ooh, stay woke. That's what it is. That's what it is, right? It's not this other type of ideology that people are trying to claim now as if it's something negative. It was a warning. Be careful about what's taking place. Next stop, Ghana, Africa. This is my last stop of my learning. One of the things I wanted to do, right, is now it was time for me to hear the stories from the other side. I've heard the stories from the hunted or from the hunter. I hadn't heard the stories from the hunted. That's the stories I want to hear now. I want to be able to have conversation. What took place here on this land at that time, right? I know what the history books tell me here, but I need to know, how did we get in this state in the first place so we don't repeat, mistakes. So I could go to Washington, D.C. by myself. I could go to South Carolina by myself. I could not go to Africa by myself. So wifey is riding shotgun. So me and wifey on our way to Ghana. We're going to be there for 2 weeks, all right? Now, let me say this. This is me and wifey on the plane flying out there. What we had to do, we had to fly from Portland to Seattle, right? That's just an hour flight. We had a 3-hour layover in Seattle. We then flew from Seattle to JFK. That's about a 5-hour flight to New York. And then from New York straight to Ghana. 10-hour flight, right? So that's a 10-hour flight from JFK to Ghana. About 30 minutes into the flight, that's my wife, right? Out like a light. If you tell her I showed you this picture, we're all dead, okay? So don't say a thing. Now, I will say 5 hours into the flight, this was me. I could not sleep. I mean, I was bug-eyed. The entire time. It was just no sleeping for me. But let me tell you why. Does anybody know? Put it in the chat. How many hours? Okay, so I told you. So it's 10 hours to fly to Ghana. Do you know how many days it took for a slave ship to go from Africa to the States? Pop quiz. Anybody put it in the chat without Googling first. Somebody said 18 hours. Yeah. The answer is 4 to 6 weeks. In some incidences, it would take 3 months. 4 to 6 weeks, 3 months. And we know what the conditions were. In my head, I wanted to get myself ready. I said, if my ancestors could fight through a ship for 4 to 6 weeks and sometimes 3 months, then I'm going to take this 10-hour flight like a G, right? I was going to try to stay awake just so I could feel a little bit of pain, just so I could feel just a little bit of something. Even though I knew it was nothing compared to what they went through, I wanted to prepare myself for where I was going. So we landed in Ghana. Here were my Ghana goals. I wanted to connect with my roots. I wanted to learn more about the creation of these systems of oppression. I wanted to hear stories from the point of view of the hunted compared to the hunters. I wanted to give back, and Lord knows I need to heal. But I said, Wifey and I are the ones that went, but we went with the group, and I'm going to share with you how we got to Ghana. This was my crew, all right? They're from the Virgin Islands. They're from New York, from different places. And we used a company called EF Tours. At the end of this presentation, I will have a complete resource list of the books I read, the places I went, and the services that I used. EF Tours was wonderful. They took care of everything. All we had to do was show up. Itinerary, flight, hotel, food, you name it. So this was the crew, and we were together. And I'm so grateful for these folks. I love them to death. Okay, so let's go. So first stop, first day, let's just check out the city, see what's going on. It's a lot going on. We showed up on a Saturday, so it was a market day. So this is, headed to the market, boats going out. They're about to do their thing. So the first day was a little bit of a lazy day. We went ahead and went to not just the heart of the city and all that was taking place, but we also ended up doing a little bit of shopping, right? So we started going into the stores. We're seeing people carry things on their heads, which I thought was really cool. And I'm sitting there standing behind them, thinking they're gonna drop something, but they were great. But only the women were carrying things on their heads. The men, for whatever reason, were not. So this is just one of the markets. Find Waldo. I'm in that picture somewhere. You might find me. But this is where a lot of shopping took place. But one of the things that you realize too, like just on this first day, try and take it easy, how clean it was. Like you saw nothing on the floors. Ghana was one of the cleanest places that I had been. And one of the reasons is they don't waste anything. Like everything they used. We went to a place that was called Trashy Bags, where they take recycled plastics, recycle everything, and they make backpacks and bags for the kids for school. So it was one of the places that we stopped. And one of the things we learned is, they just wasted nothing here, and the people were so friendly. Truth be told, I didn't know. I didn't know how I was going to be treated coming from America, right? Arms wide open. So that was the first day. Just really kind of getting to know the city a little bit. But then it was time to start doing the learning. We started by going to the W.B. Du Bois Memorial Center. This is a museum. This was his house. This is where he lived. It's also where he died. And it was also great to learn, what did he do to create change, right? Great, great mind. But one thing I want you to know about this great mind is this great mind conflicted with other great minds. Uh-oh, I went too far. Hold on. Sorry about that. Conflicted with other great minds. Booker T. Washington, the one who went to the White House, he's in the middle, right? And then outside of that, you have Marcus Garvey, also, who's on the far right. These were 3 great activists during the time. They did not get along. I don't know if folks knew this. They did not share the same philosophies. They did not share or believe in the same way on what it would take to move the work forward, right? On one side, W.B. Du Bois, he believed, let's focus on the elite 10. Let's focus on the top 10 of the Black class. Let's help them to succeed. Because if they can succeed, they can bring everybody else up, right? Where Garvey said, no, that's not the way to do it, right? We need to help the common people where they are. And Booker T. Washington, he was about, forget all that. We need to work on the trades. Let's not try to simulate. Let's not try to segregate. Let's just do our thing and earn our own skills and make our own way. So long story short, a lot of different philosophies of what success looks like. Just like, different programs here might have different ideas on what equity and work looks like. But you know who brought them all together? You know who, talked to them on the side and got them straight? Ida B. Wells. Once again, it was another woman who steps up and really starts talking in their ears around how we need to come together and how we need to move forward. Such a strong voice was Ida B. Wells. And so one of the things that I'm slowly learning from Booker T. Washington, from Du Bois, from Garvey, from Ida B. Wells, right, is what were their philosophies? What were their thoughts that brought the change? Look at this quote by Du Bois. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It's today that our best work can be done and not some future day or future year. Tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. And the reason why I love the quote is it calls to action everybody from all different walks today to kind of move forward and do the work. That's his grave, because once again, I said that's where he passed away. But the other thing I hope that you learned or I wanted to share about W.D. Du Bois that spoke to me is his philosophy changed throughout his years of work. Like what he believed and swore up and down on, the more he learned, he changed his mind and he realized that he was wrong, right? And I think that would be helpful for all of us to do. Because I think sometimes we get so stuck in our way of how to move this work that we're not willing to listen to others that might have a different philosophy. W.B. Du Bois, speaking about running your race, died 3 days before Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. He ended up passing away. So, but he ran his race, right? He did his part. I want to introduce you to a few more before I go a little deeper than I probably want to go in this journey. This person here, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he was the one that helped fight for the independence for Ghana. And this wasn't like a long time ago. This was 1957. Okay, 1957 is when Ghana got their independence from the British. And so when you read one of his great quotes, you can't help but hear the equity North Star, our equity North Star, in one of this man's speeches. What does he say? We shall measure progress by the improvement in the health of our people, by the number of children in school, and by the quality of their education, by the availability of water and electricity in our towns and villages, and by the happiness which our people take in being able to manage their own affairs. If that's not human services, I don't know what is. The welfare of our people is our chief pride, and it's by this that my government shall be judged. Who was he speaking to? He was speaking to us, right? We talk about community engagement. That's what he's talking about. We're talking about how we're going to measure the work when everybody, regardless of your background, right, has the opportunity to have access and well-being. That's our North Star. But what's important is how it's being measured, right? And I think we can learn a lot about the work that we do and how we measure the work. Very important person. What you see is him pointing forward because he has a quote that he often shares is forward forever, backwards never, right? To continue make progress and to continue to move. He was part of a big six. He didn't do it by himself. There were others that did the work. And you ask the question, how did they get independence? How did they do the work? By negotiation, right? Not by anything else other than building the relationship and building the trust of those that were able to grant them the path to independence, and by never backing down. He refused to have anything less than independence. So Ghana's independence in 1957 was achieved through negotiations led by the United Nations. The Africans in the Gold Coast colony were unwilling to accept anything else. And these are known as the Big Six that led the way. So popular are they? They're on the money. This is the money. It's called CDs. $100 in Ghana is like $10 to us, right? But this is who they were. So after kind of taking notes, right, and at the end of this presentation, I shared the things that I learned from all of them. I moved to a palace. This palace here is the Manhia Palace, which is a place where the Ashanti stayed. If there's one thing that stood out for me when I walked through this palace, was a real understanding of how much we tried to fight, not just for our independence. No, no, no. This is before that. To fight to continue with the freedoms that we had before the British came. The Ashantis have a king, right? The wars that were taking place at that time were due because they were trying to get control. The British were trying to get control of the land and the people. And they were governed by a king, and they're also governed by a queen. And the Ashanti people were one of the best fighters that Africa had to offer, definitely within Ghana. They weren't just about the arts and crafts. They were about arts and crafts, but they were also warriors. But still, when it came to the weaponry of the British, it wasn't much of a match. And there were several wars that took place. There were like 4 or 5 different wars. One of the most treasured things that they owned was known as the golden stool. It was a symbol of unity. They believed that it was a gift from the gods to have. So sacred was it that they don't even sit on it, right? Like, I mean, this is how important to the Shanti people they were. And the British came for it. You know, throughout these wars, they didn't just want to take their land. They didn't just want to take their bodies, right? They wanted to take their souls, including this golden stool. But you asked me, how were they able to keep the stool? And I'll tell you what I've always told you. It was a woman who made the difference. It was the queen. There was a time when the war was coming and they were going to come to try to steal the golden stool. And at this point, the Ashanti knew that they were no match. They were no match for machine guns. They're no match for cannons. They didn't have the weaponry, right? And so they weren't willing to fight. They weren't willing to do what they could to protect the golden stool until the queen stood up and got before the warriors and told them, arise. This is her exact speech. Arise, men, and defend the golden stool from being captured by foreigners. It is more honorable to perish in defense of the golden stool than remain in perpetual slavery. I am prepared and ready to lead you to war against them. I would rather die than to be a slave. And so they came for that golden stool. But let me tell you something my father told me, and I saw that showed up in The Queen. My father used to say, because I played basketball, right? Son, there's 3 ways that you could beat your opponent. You could A, you could outplay them. You could B, you could outsmart them. Or C, you could just plain intimidate them. The Queen knew that they couldn't outfight them. The Queen also knew that she wasn't going to be able to intimidate these British soldiers. So she had to outsmart them. So she had the Ashanti people make a fake stool. And they came and they fought. And they captured what they thought was the real stool, but the real stool was hidden. And it was hidden for 40 years in the wilderness so that the British couldn't find it. Well, the wars took place and we lost. And I love that. Thank you, Dion. The Shantis lost. And the reason that they lost, once again, was because of the weaponry. This was the best effort that the Africans had. This was the best words that they had to be able to kind of continue to fight. But when they came against machine guns and cannons, they couldn't do it. And over 2,000 Africans were killed on that day. The British, let me show that. So outside the palace was a place that I had a chance to kind of sit and kind of reflect around the stories that was told. One of the walkways that blessed my soul was to know that we really were kings and queens at one point. So when we call each other queen and say king, we're not just making something up here. This is where the British built their place. This is the enslaved castle right here in Ghana. This is at Cape Coast. This is where the British live. You see the cannons. When I took this picture, my back was at the Atlantic, right? Because there were other ships coming trying to steal slaves as well, and the British would fight them off. Look how big the cannonballs are, right? They're sitting right there where you can see the cannon. There's a better picture of them. In this compound that's still there, they still have the cells and the places where they kept the slaves, right? So it's still sitting in there. So we had a chance to walk in there, and this is where it got a little bit humbling. When you went inside one of the slave cells, it was super dark. The only light that you had that came through here. They would have up to 300 slaves in one cell, which means standing up was your only option. Now, look at the ground. You see this. This is not cement. This is not mud. Let me show you a better picture of it. This is crystallized feces. They didn't get bathroom breaks. On the wall, you could have seen a line going across the entire wall of how much this piled up. This just happened to be crystallized, but this is the feces of the slave. It's still there. That's the kind of living conditions that they were in and that they had to stay in. This is the cell from the inside, from the outside of the cell looking in. They kept the men in one, they kept the women in the other. Wife and I took a picture in front, but what was interesting was this man right here who told the story of what happened. He told the story on how we got in the situation that we're in. Although this is going to be available, I won't play it now, but let me share with you what he shared with us. They used Africans to get other Africans. That's true. And because there was an opening, they succeeded. Because back then, what would take place is you could actually have a indigent servants, right? And so if we had indigent servants that were in Africa that were working to pay off a debt to other Africans, when the British came, they said, "Oh, give them to us, right? We'll give you guns. So you'll have the opportunity to have better weaponry against other Africans." And as a result, because there were these silos, because of there was not peace within Africa itself, it opened the door for the British to come. And so when we hear the stories of Africans selling Africans, they did for guns, right? And they did for weaponry. And they would sometimes even tell stories that had the Africans believe that they were going to a better place when the truth was that they were being sold into slavery. I don't have the time today to play this, but it plays through.
Basically,
This here is what they would call the door of no return. This is the door that once you went through, you never came back. But here is, I want to share, because I see time is fleeing us, is the healing process and the lessons learned. We went for a walk. It was a long walk from the castle. And we walked to a place that was called the Last Bath, also known as the Ancestral River. When you went through these doors, you had more way to walk. So we continued to walk, and we continued to walk. After we got done with the long walk, we ended up at this place. This is what they called the Last Bath. This is where they washed the slaves before they were auctioned and shipped off. So they would go down in here to get clean. When I took this picture, there just happened to be someone coming who wanted to take some water back. After the bath was the first auction. So they were auctioned off. And then after they were auctioned off after their bath, they went straight to being branded. Because before you got to the river, where I was standing in this picture, taking the picture, was an open space. And in this open space is where the bath and the branding took place. Then from there, you went back to the door of no return, where you did return. This is where my healing took place. Because I was called to go and walk in the river. So I stepped in the river where the last bath took place. While standing in the river of where the last bath took place, if you've ever been to a beach, you could grab a seashell, put it to your ear, and hear the sea. I promise you, when I closed my eyes, I felt like I was there. And I sat there and just imagined and thought that this was it. This was the place where my ancestors had their last bath. But then something else happened while I was standing there. I thought about the cell they were in. I thought about the 6-week trip that they took on that ship to get to America. I thought about the abuse. I thought about what they went through. I don't know what happened to me while I was standing in that water, but it went from a somber sadness to such a feeling of strength and motivation. Because I think I shared with you, I was losing motivation in the work. There is no way on God's green earth that I could give up now, right? When I think what they went through, like there's no way in the world I cannot do what I'm doing now. I have got to run this race and complain. You will never see this black man complain again about a thing. We talk about microaggressions here. Someone hurt our feelings. Someone, please, right? Like, please. I get it. There are microaggressions at ODHS, but we are not going to get knocked down by spitballs when we stop and think about what folks went through before us. We can bring the change, but we're going to bring the change with a new type of determination. I was so motivated standing in that water, like to this day. My heart beats to some African drums that still beat to this day. And I am so excited to be your OED Director of Equity and to move forward. So happy was I about this feeling that I had to call my wife into the room. So my wife came into the water too. So I'm standing there in the water. I'm looking out. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I can do this. If this is where they bathed, if this is where their last bath was, I can make them proud. I can continue to work till they finished. So what did I do? I called my wife and we made a commitment, right? We made a pact that we would never forget and that we were going to make our ancestors proud. And that's what we did. What I didn't share is my wife is in D&I too. So she does D&I work. So you talking about a team over here that is just feeding off each other, moving forward. And so what was nice is on your way out, everything changes, right? Everything changes from what was to what's going to be. It's a big welcome back home. There's a big memorial. We have a chance to kind of sign your name about who you are and coming back home. So it was a healing process. It was nice. So to end my African trip, right, I got what I needed. I got what I learned. I got the healing. Now it's time to go see some stingless bees, beautiful trees, and enjoy the breeze. So what I'll quickly go through are just pictures of Ghana. It was just beautiful. You know, when the sunlight hits you right, you got to take a selfie. Right? So that's what my wife and I had to do there. We had to cross some dangerous bridges, right? And so that's yours truly, trying to cross a dangerous bridge to try to get to something special, which we did find. We made it to the other side, and our group ran to what we call, he was like a medicine man. This dude here had the cure for everything. I'm going to leave this available for folks. When you press play, he's going to tell you how to cure cholesterol naturally. Like he had a cure for everything. It was just wonderful. All from the land. This is the stingless bees. Saw black folks playing polo. Of course, you had to stop by and see the children. So we definitely played with the children. I tried to teach them how to dance. They were posing. They were posing for the dance there. This was the school. But what was interesting is, although this was their school, right? This is where they hung out. Even at the school, there was this hole, which was a place where they led slaves that they're trying to sneak out, especially before paying taxes to the British and others. And this was at the school where this was found. This was our hotel. Don't let people fool you that Ghana didn't have nice things. Ghana was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. This is wifey and I eating at the beach and just enjoying our time together. And then last but not least, just when I didn't think it could get any better, this happened. I was invited to a village. And as I was walking down, going to this village, I didn't know what to expect. But when I walked in, I saw this. He was the chief of the village, and these were the folks. They didn't just want to welcome us home. they wanted to give us a new name. And so this was the naming ceremony. This was the king. And when you met the king, there were certain of the chief. There were certain things you didn't do. I was super nervous. I ain't gonna lie. I was I was scared. One of the things you couldn't do is you couldn't gesture with your left hand. If you gesture with your left hand, it was disrespectful. You couldn't cross your legs in front of him. If you crossed your legs, that was disrespectful. You couldn't talk to him directly. You got to talk to the person next to him, right? But then I was called up. They called my name, and I had the chance to sit in front of him. What's interesting is when you're given a name in Africa, and in this particular in Ghana, you're not named on the first day. You're named on the seventh day. The first day, you're given a name according to the day of the week you were born. It might be Kwame. It might be Keku, which was mine, because I was a male born on Wednesday. But for the first week, you're not given a name, because the chief elders and all are thinking and praying and talking to the ancestors to see who you will be and what you'll be named. But then this is what happened, and this is what you'll see next. You see me sitting in front of the king, because he had water and he had gin. And they would give this to all the babies at the naming ceremony. They would put a drop of water in the baby's mouth and say, "This is water, call it water." They would do it 3 times. And then they would give the baby gin and say, "This is gin, call it gin." And the reason why they were doing that, it was letting the baby know as a way of saying, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Right? To speak the truth. If it's wrong, say it's wrong. If it's right, say it's right. They teach that from the very beginning. So that's what the king did. He gave me water, and he said, "What is it?" And I had to say water 3 times. Here's what the problem is. Your director of equity don't drink. So when he gave me the gin, I was supposed to say it's gin. But because I don't drink, it burned a brother's throat. I tried to say gin. But what came out was, and even the king looked at me. And everybody looked at me like they didn't know what the problem was. And my wife was taking the picture. She was laughing because she was trying to say, he doesn't drink, right? But eventually I said it 3 times and said it was gin. And then I was given a new name. The new name is Papa KQ Ababu, which means a good man, the one who has come home. That meant a lot to me. I love that, right? And so leaving there, I had a chance, and this was the last day, shaking the king's hand. I was still afraid to look at him, in his eye. You can't see the tears in mine, but that was it. It was a beautiful way to end the entire stay there. And so then it was time to come on home, and that's what I did. The whole time that I was there, I never experienced racism, not once. Nobody cared what you wore. Nobody cared about how you showed up, ability, disability. There was nobody cared. What they cared about was taking care of one another. And they were so happy with what they had. It was just transformational to me to see what's possible, and how folks could live together. And so this was a statue that I bought because I spent a lot of time reflecting and thinking, and it sits at my desk right now at home. And so now it's time for the work. Lessons learned. What I have here is a list of all the things I feel like our agency can do different, and do better. There's 3 of them. A lot of them are things that I shared along the way. I just put them all together in the end. So I won't go over them now, but they will be available because this video will be available. And I'm going to do my best to clean up the PowerPoint and make it as much as available as possible. But there's a lot that we can learn. And so with that, also the resources, the EF tours, I'm gonna have the website for you all if you all are interested in taking trips yourself. The books that I read, the places that I went, will all be available for folks. And so in Ghana, they speak a language called Twi Madasi. It means thank you. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to kind of share my story, share my journey, share my vulnerability, and give you a little hint on how I'm going to show up different for you all in the work that we do. So with that, I am going to stop sharing. look you all in the eyes a bit. Let me close this out. And open it up. If there's anything that anybody wants to say that resonated or stood out that you want to put in the chat, please feel free to do so. I see the thank yous. I appreciate you all sticking around for the whole thing. I know it was long. I know it was a lot. I know we only have 4 minutes. That's promised. For those who want to stay long to have conversation, I'm willing to stick around for a little bit before I need to run out and support some folks at a leadership graduation that's coming up. So with that, I'll yield the mic.
Yeah, hi, this is Cece. I am African, as most of you know, and I got to be educated. I mean, I know most of the things that you showed. I know about Ghana. Ghana is next door to Nigeria, and just hearing the experience and the emotions and the journey and all that you went through and all that you experienced. I mean, kind of brought a lot of things back to, back to my mind and back to my spirit. And back to one of the slides you were talking about when going through that door, as soon as you said that, what was ministered to my spirit was you returned, right? It's a door to no, you're not coming back, but then you came back. So, and then you mentioned, it's just, it's just very emotional for me. And I appreciate you sharing your journey and sharing the experience. It's incredible. It's powerful. And the naming convention thing, the naming tradition is very important in Africa, all over Africa. Just like Abraham, Abraham became Abraham, you became your new name. So
Yeah.
the spirit aligned there. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I learned in Africa. Everything has meaning. Like everything, there's so much symbolism and so much meaning in everything that they do. Yeah, it's truly humble experience. Thank you, Cece. Mish, I didn't know you were here. Show yourself, my friend.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Can you see me though? I don't know if you can see me.
I can't see you. I see a little camera icon, but just hearing your voice alone.
Oh, I don't
makes
know
me
why
smile.
the camera didn't come on. I just wanted to say I appreciated you talking about how it weighed you down and taking space and finding your way. As you know, we've had many talks, and um, I appreciated just you giving voice to that and saying it's okay, as someone who did that and found their way back. I also can't tell you what it meant to see it. As you know, we've talked about my family, and my bio father is Gullah Geechee, and so just watching you go to the Carolinas, we don't think about the things that we really have, that we get to keep, because you talked about the things you didn't know, the things we do know. And so I appreciated that you shared so many rich stories. There just wasn't one story. And there wasn't just one way. And I really just wanted to, and I'll send you an email with it, but I really have been thinking about what we said in our last conversation. And so I had been wondering, should I share this? So many words, but I just wanted to say thank you for putting this out here and just reminding us that we are all doing the work we're supposed to be doing. And it's okay to breathe sometimes. It's okay to remember where we go, but that we're in this together. I think that's really the final piece of just that reminder, is that we're not alone. And I can't, you know me, I don't have enough words, and I always have words to express to you how much I appreciate that resonating, that not only are we not alone, but still will rise. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mish. Good to hear from you.
Frederick is next.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, can you hear me? I was having a hard time hitting the mute.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about, and I'll be honest, Dion, I was just thinking about, um, sending an email after, everything, but I thought, sometimes I just need to, I thought, it's probably take the chance, get on the mic and just say a big, big thank you, for the presentation. I'll just say my garage door is broken. They came out to repair, and then, like I'm telling them, you know what? I don't want to miss any part of this presentation. I am, and I'm also just, started to take the space because I'm originally from Ghana, and I think you did a beautiful job with,
Well, thank you.
with the presentation and everything, you learned and talked about, about Ghana. I myself been thinking about, I've heard about the African Museum in DC. I've thought about going there and then, just learning some things for myself. But in the way you have brought all this together, from here and connecting it to everything back in Ghana, Africa, even gives me more energy now, to want to also, explore this for myself. Yeah, there's rich history. The quotes about, some of the people that you were quoting, like Nkrumah,
Yeah.
yeah, Santiwa, and you also said something about women. I know in Ghana there's a great quote by an educationist who said, and it's something that runs, it said, that if you educate a woman, you educate a whole nation. But if you educate a man, you educate an individual. That is a very popular code in Ghana. In all our schools, we teach, about equity and, just the respect for everyone. So I just wanted to, again, jump on and say, really, really appreciate this. Is beautiful. I grew up in the upper part of Ghana. There are so many other things about, the slavery and all the route from the north to the south and into the ship. Yeah, it's always humbling. It's always humbling, to go through that history and then, just learn about where we've come and where we are today, and how everything ties together, to even some of the experiences here. So really, really appreciate you. I think I couldn't even have even done it the way you have done it. I think it's great. Thank you.
Adasi, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, good people. I know it's lunchtime now, and we got other things to get to. So, once again, from the bottom of my heart, I just appreciate you all allowing me to share and show up as my authentic self. And also, so looking forward to the walk and the work towards our Equity North Star together. So, with that, thanks everybody, and I will see you along that path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.